Hello, my name's Adrian and I'm from Australia. Today we're going to look at designing and developing a mobile application from beginning to end. We're going to look at every single step in the process, such as looking at the UI, the UX, keeping to a style guide, using design tools such as Figma, as well as later coding it and making sure that the application looks and feels the same as the original design. So whether you're a UX designer, UI designer, whether you're in front end or back end, or even if you're a full stack, this video will give you an insight into every single step in the process and help you better understand how to build a mobile application. Now, if you like this kind of content, if you're on videos like it, please hit subscribe and hit the like button because it lets me know what kind of content you guys like. And let's just jump right into it. The business we're looking at is called GP Book. They're a referral directory with thousands of health professionals in there. And while they have a website, they don't have an app. So we're going to have a look at the website and we're going to have a look at the design principles they've implemented. We're going to see if we can carry those across onto the application so that there's a consistent feel between the two. To build the UI, I'm going to open up a design tool called Figma. There are others out there like Sketch or Adobe XD or even Photoshop. But I like Figma simply because it works on any OS, and because it's in the browser, you can access it from anywhere. So we've got Figma open up with a blank canvas. Let's go to the GP Book website and let's take a screenshot of the entire website as is. We'll pull this in by using the screenshot capture extension from Chrome. And once that's done, we're going to copy over the screenshot and we're going to paste it into our Figma design, which is here. Whenever I'm doing a design, I like to pull in as many resources before I get started. Let's first pull in the logo for GP Book. Then we'll also pull in this SVG of all the doctors. And then we'll also pull in a picture of the male and female head icons that we'll be using later, which is in here. Now that these are imported, we can use these as components later in our design. Now to get started, we're going to select the frame tool here in Figma, and we're going to select the iPhone 11 Pro. This will create a small screen that we can start putting our UI in. Let's pull these ones across to the right here and zoom in by hitting Control and scrolling up. So next up, we want to move these components directly into the frame. This will make them part of this frame group. With that done, we're going to move these around so that they make a little bit more sense. We'll move the logo to the top and hold Shift to resize it to 40 pixels. We'll move this section here, put it a little bit more centered, and these two we're not going to use just yet. We'll leave them for later. Next, we'll want to have a look at the website and the design patterns and colors they're using so that we can have a consistent feel between the website and the application. Let's zoom out and have a look over here. So we can see here we've got the main group of doctors with a search below it. So let's replicate that in our mobile application. We'll zoom back in and we'll create a single box here below the doctors. We'll make this 300 by 40. We'll make sure that this is nice and centered. Next, let's add some border radius so it looks a little bit more neat. And we'll have a little bit of padding there. Finally, we'll want to update the color. Let's pull in a color that's not too dark and not too light so that it has enough contrast so that people know it's selectable for text, but also that we can see that text. Let's select the text icon here and let's start putting begin search. Now this probably needs to be a little bit bigger. So let's make the font size maybe 14 pixels, maybe 16. We'll put this just a little bit here with some padding. Since this is a text input and this is placeholder text, we'll want to make this a lot lighter. Let's change the opacity to 50%. That looks much better. Next, let's create a button to execute this search. We'll copy the input we created earlier and move it below. Let's change the input color to be the primary color of the application. And let's create the text to be white so that it has better contrast against people who see it. We'll move this in the middle and we'll make the button a little bit smaller so that it doesn't overlay too much on our design. That looks good. Next, let's create a section underneath here for recently viewed items. We'll call this recently viewed. Let's make this text a little bit bigger, maybe font size 24. And let's make the color a little bit lighter. Let's select the placeholder text color here. Great. In here, we'll design some components to show the actual doctors. If we have a look at the main website, this is sort of what the UI looks like. So let's keep something consistent in mind when we design the one for the application. In here, let's create a box which is about 64 by 64. Let's add a border radius of about 4 pixels and let's move this in line with the recently viewed text. Next, let's make the background for this the same background that we've used for the text input earlier. That looks alright. Now let's create some text for the actual doctor's name. We'll call them Dr. John Smith. This is a little bit too large, so let's first move this into place and maybe make this a size 18. I think that should be okay. Underneath this, let's create another text input with the type of doctor they are. In this case, maybe cardiology. Let's make this stand out a little bit more by setting it as the primary color for our application. That looks okay. And finally, let's put in the address where he's located. We'll create a new address and we'll make something like 17 Place Road, Suburb, WA. This is a little bit too large and a little bit too dark. So let's make this a little bit smaller, maybe 15 pixels. And let's make this the same color as the placeholder text we created earlier. Now this has really good contrast, really good placement, and I think it stands out just fine. Finally, we can put in the doctor here into this placeholder. We'll have to move the layer up above the rectangle we created earlier and resize it so it fits in properly. Great, I think that looks pretty good. Let's reuse this component we've now created by first grouping it and calling it doctor. We'll duplicate it by hitting Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V and moving it a little bit below. And we'll swap this one out with a female doctor this time by moving this SVG up into the same layer, resizing it a little bit, and also probably changing the name to Jenny. Great. Finally, let's add some spacing between the two. We'll add a line here between them, and that should be just enough to show that there is a difference between the two. We'll make this line the same color as the placeholder text, so it's not too dark. And I think the spacing is about 12 pixels between each element. Now we can add an indefinite amount of elements each time with about 23 pixels here. Let's copy this one across. Beautiful. So I think that looks really good to start our application off. We'll have a little bit of space here for the menu, which we'll now design. So sometimes after designing something, you might see that there's a little bit too much padding or there's not enough padding. So that's a good time to really adjust all your components so that you make sure that everything has a consistent feel and look. We'll do this now. This group of doctors probably doesn't have to be so far below the top of the screen. Let's make it align more with the logo and center it. Next up, this text input probably only has to be 10 to 12 pixels below this main group of doctors. And the search probably also 12 pixels below the text input. That way we have a consistent feel. Let's make this text input all the way out and give it 12 pixels of padding so that everything has a consistent 12 pixel look and feel. Let's move this also about 12 pixels. Great. With the recent items, it is padded too much as well. So let's move this up here, give it 12 pixels from the top and give it 12 pixels from the left. We can then do the same for all the components here that we've created. 12 pixels down and 12 pixels from the left. And then also 12 pixels for the line spacer. Great. Let's do the rest of the components here. And copy this last line, and the rest we can just copy paste. So now that we've done that, we can see that it has a more consistent look and feel, and everything is padded accurately. The recently viewed section does look a little bit close to the begin search section. So let's move this down another 12 pixels. That should give it just some nice room to breathe and put more focus on the begin search. Let's design the menu now. It's one of the easiest things to do. It's usually only just one single line that's 50 pixels above the application's bottom. Let's do that now. Beautiful. This is a little bit too dark, so let's have a look at the color we had here for our placeholder. Let's make it a little bit darker than that. Great. Now we can add some icons on there so it looks a little bit neater. Let's create the menu buttons now. We'll have 4 of them. The first one will be search. We'll make this font size 13 because we don't have much room to play with. We'll make this color a little bit lighter. Let's make it the same color as the placeholder text here. Let's add an icon in. We'll use Font Awesome, which is a great package with lots of font icons, whether it's on the web or for mobile. We'll use the free version. Or actually, let's use the Pro version. It's got some more features. For the icon, we'll make it size 18, so it's a little bit bigger, and we'll center it here between our text. Great. Let's make this also a little bit higher so that we can read it well. Beautiful. So that's our first item there. Using this, let's copy across a couple more items. We'll want 4 at the end, so let's make those now. We'll want to evenly space them, so let's put 1 on either end. Let's put these sort of in the middle, and let's make sure that the spacing is about the same for each one of them, which is 59 pixels. Let's move this a little bit to the right now. I think that's good. Finally, let's change these ones. First, we'll have one which will be called history. Maybe one which is called users, and maybe one which is called settings. Great. Let's make these all nice and centered, and let's change the logo for each one. This one might be cogs. This one can be users, and for history, maybe bars. Let's center each one of these so they look good. Finally, we'll make sure that the item we're currently on is a primary color so that we know that it's active. Let's set this as the primary color here. And maybe let's add a thicker line to the top so that we can really tell that it's active. Let's pull in a line here from our shapes, and let's make it about 2 pixels and put it just above. There we go, and 2 pixels. Beautiful. So I'm very happy with this design. It follows a lot of the same design principles that the website was doing and has a very consistent look and feel. If someone's coming from the website to the mobile application, they'll understand how to use it immediately. Let's have a look now at actually designing this into a real application. A lot of the times when designs are made by UI designers, the application never looks quite the same. We're going to have a look at how we can code this so it looks exactly the same as we've designed it here. We have Visual Studio open here. We're going to run npx react-native init and then gpbook app. This will start creating the project files for us to begin. I'm also going to open up Android Studio and run an emulated Android device for us to start beginning the work. Let's do this now. I've got a blank project here. I'm going to open it up, and in Android Studio you have your emulators at the top right. Let's select that and open up the Nexus 5 device. While that's starting in the background, let's close everything else off. With that done, we're going to browse into our app and we're going to run npx react-native run-android. This will start our application. I'll also want to install one more package, and that's styled components. We'll run yarn add styled components. This is a package that will help us do some styling on our components that's very similar to CSS. And for those people coming from the web, it'll make it much easier to get started. Great, we're now up and running. We're going to browse into the directory by opening the folder and selecting gpbook app. That's great. Now with this directory open, we can start having a look at customizing our application. I'm going to create a new folder called src, and in here I'm going to create a file called app.js. This empty file is where we'll get started. I'm going to run rnc to pre-populate a small React Native component, and we're going to edit the index.js file and point the application to our new app folder. Next, let's add all the media items we're planning to use. We'll drag this into our src folder, and now we'll be able to access that. Let's get rid of everything else here. We'll start completely fresh. This next part I'll try to keep consistent so that people who both use the web and mobile will understand. we'll create a home component. Let's call this home, and let's do an arrow function and make a body tag. This is similar to the web. This body tag will be a styled component. We'll call body equals style.view, and we'll set the flex to 1 so it spans the whole screen. This should make sense to most people. We'll export this as our default component. Maybe we'll also change this to a scroll view so that it's scrollable. Next, let's create the logo for the design. We'll do this by importing the logo from the media. Let's run import logo from gpbook logo.png. Let's create an element for this. Let's call const logo equals styled component, and we'll make this an image. And let's do the height as 64 pixels and the width as 64 pixels. Let's put this in here and call the source, which will be the logo. Let's see if this pops up. It does. Let's add some margins to this. We'll do 12 pixels because that's what we're doing consistently for most of our application. Great. Let's add the doctors in. We'll import doctors from the PNG. We'll copy the logo and we'll create a new component from it. Let's call this doctors. Let's copy over the source and let's make the width 100% and maybe the height 128 pixels. Let's now also create a background size, and normally in React Native this is called resize mode. I'll put this to contain. Beautiful. This still doesn't look exactly the same as our design, which is over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little bit bigger by making it maybe 150 pixels, and we're going to remove the margin. Then we're also going to make the logo a little bit smaller by making it 48 pixels. We're going to remove the margin at the bottom. There, that looks much better. Now let's create our text input. Let's create a form, and in here we'll have an input. Let's create a styled component called form, and we'll have that as a view. This will have maybe 12 pixels padding on the left and 12 pixels padding on the right. For the text input, we'll create a const input equals styled text input for React Native. And let's make this a background of maybe, let's pull in the color that we previously used in here. So this was F3 something. Let's make this a width 100%, border radius probably 30 pixels. Let's see if this works. There. So we've got that up and running, but it looks like it needs some more padding. Let's fix that up now. And let's add some placeholder text. We'll keep this similar to what we had in the design. We'll probably also need some padding for the actual input. And we'll probably need the font size to be a little bit bigger. All right, that looks really good. Let's compare it to our design. That's great. So let's create the button for our form. Let's create a button with some span text. And we'll call this begin search. Let's create a style component for both. We'll create a span, which will be a style.text, and we'll make this the color white. And maybe we'll also make the font size 18. Then we'll create a style component for the button, and we'll make this a touchable opacity. We'll make this the primary color of our application, which we'll pull in here. OA. Let's make this padding 12. Maybe we'll also add some margin at the top. And let's add some border radius. All right, that looks good. I think it needs a little bit more padding on the left and right though. Great. So now we've got a touchable opacity button, and we've got our text input. That's starting to look really good. Now let's create our recent items. Let's create a h1 tag, and let's create a component for that. Will be a text component. We'll do a margin of 12, and we'll do a font size of maybe 24 pixels, and we'll do a color of maybe A. In here, we'll type in recent items and see how that looks. Great, I'm pretty happy with that. Now let's create our doctor component. We're going to use this a few times, so let's make it separately. Here we'll call doctor and create a component specially for that. This one will have a doctor view, which will hold maybe a avatar, and this will have the image of the avatar. Down here we'll have the details, and in here maybe we'll have the h2 tag of the name. Maybe we'll call this just name. The second one can be specialty, and finally we can have address. Let's try this out now. Dr. John Smith. Specialty will be cardiology. And address will be 17 Street, Suburban State. For the avatar, we'll pass in an image in a second. Let's import that up above. We'll import male doctor from doctor-mail.png. Let's pass that in as a source. Finally, let's create style components for each one of these. So let's create the doctor view component. We'll run const doctor view equals styled.view. We'll make it padding of 12, and we'll add a border bottom. We'll make the width 1 pixel, and we'll make the color gray. Let's create empty styled components for every one of these. I'm just going to paste them right in here. Some of them are text, some of them are view, and some of them are images. The first thing we'll do is change the image avatar. Let's make this 64 by 64. Let's add a background color to that. Let's have a look at the background color for this component, which is here, and copy that across to our application. Let's also add a border radius. And let's make that 4 pixels. If we save that, let's have a look. There it is. Let's change the flex on this and make the direction row. That looks better. Let's make the name a little bit bigger, maybe 18 pixels, and the font a little bit darker, maybe 500. Let's get the specialty and copy across the primary color for it. Let's set this here as 00A, and let's make this a little bit bigger as well. Finally, the address, which I believe was font size 15 pixels, and the color was a little bit darker, maybe 777. Great. Now the line spacing is a little bit off, so let's fix that up. Let's make this 15 pixels, this 18 pixels, and this also 18 pixels. With that, everything seems to fit a lot better. Let's make sure everything aligns properly too. We'll do align items and we'll do center. Great. Finally, let's add a little bit of margin here, maybe 12 pixels to the right. Perfect. I'm pretty happy with that component, though I think the name can be a little bit bigger. Let's fix this up and make it 20 pixels. So that looks pretty good, but we can still make some optimizations. Like this bottom line is a little bit too dark, our recent items are a little bit too small, and our avatar doesn't have any padding. Let's do some of those fixes right now. So to fix the avatar, we're going to move this styling below. We're going to change this to be 60 pixels. I'm going to remove the rest. Down here, we're just going to make the padding at the top, and here we're going to add a resize mode. And we'll set this to contain. That should look a lot better. Now we'll update the styling and make sure the flex direction is correct. We'll have this as a row. We'll do align items and we'll have this as center, justify content, we'll have this as flex end. Actually, we'll swap these two. I always get them confused. Great, that looks much better. For the border, we're going to make it lighter. We'll make it the color E1, E1, E1. That's much lighter gray. Next, let's have a look at the recent items text, which is a little bit too small. Let's make this 30 pixels. That looks a lot better, but there's too much padding on the bottom. Let's remove the margin at the bottom. Great. Let's copy the doctor component a few times to see how that looks. Great. Now, sometimes we have a male or a female. Let's import the female icon here. And let's change the prop here. We'll call gender, and we'll call this one female. Let's pass that into our component. Let's do a gender check. If gender equals female, let's show the female doctor. Otherwise, we'll show the male doctor. Easy. And that's updated. So let's see what we've done. Here's our React Native code, and here's our design on the right. We've done a pretty good job. You can keep optimizing every single element so it's identical, but obviously this is just more to give you an idea that it's possible. I hope this video has given you a good insight into what's required for designing and developing a mobile application. It's not always easy, but if you know the steps that you have to do, you can just check them off one at a time, and before you know it, your application is up and running. Now, if you haven't already, hit subscribe and hit like, because it lets me know what kind of content you guys like. If you have feedback or ideas of what kind of content you guys like, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you very much.